What up? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On this show, we talk about how to raise money successfully using crowdfunding, and we talk about how you can do that. We try to bring on real-world entrepreneurs, people that are doing that every single day, creators, artists, inventors. This is the Renaissance, man, and you are a part of it. So today's episode, we're focusing on Patreon, and specifically, why is this important? Why should this be on your radar? How is this different from Kickstarter and Indiegogo? And today's going to be a solo episode, so you're just going to be with me today. And the reason is that I think there needs to be some bedrock foundational education about this before we begin to bring on guests when it relates to that. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to be getting into it in just a second. We're going to be showing you exactly why this is so freaking important, why this should be on the top of your mind, and why this is something you can actually combine with Kickstarter, with Indiegogo, and also something you combine even with a WeFunder campaign. And it's coming up right after this. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillment, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar, Patreon is a website that you can use, and basically this is called subscription-based crowdfunding. So what do you use Patreon for? Why does this matter? And how can you actually combine this with a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo raise? So first of all, you can go to patreon.com and you can learn a little bit about this. What subscription-based crowdfunding is that rather than you raising money in one lump sum, which is how you do Kickstarter, Indiegogo, right? One lump sum, you have a fundraising duration, you have a goal, you set that goal, and as long as you exceed it on Kickstarter, you're going to be able to keep those funds. With Indiegogo, you can do flexible or fixed funding, right? You can also then keep those funds. So that's really how traditional crowdfunding is in terms of rewards-based crowdfunding works. This is rewards-based crowdfunding with Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Subscription-based crowdfunding is different in that rather than you raising one lump sum in the way you would do with traditional crowdfunding, instead, you're getting people to support you on a monthly basis or on a per creation basis. So think of it this way. You could plan for a Kickstarter campaign launch, you're planning for 6 months, you're planning for 3 months, whatever it is, you're planning for a year to do a mega launch, to do a 6 or a 7-figure campaign that way. That is one route you can go if you're trying to get a project funded. If you're a creator, you're a podcaster, you're a YouTuber, you're a writer, you're putting out creations on a more frequent basis, you're a comic book creator, for example, you might decide that, you know what, rather than raising money once or twice a year with a really big project, instead, I want people to support me on a monthly recurring income basis. And this is exactly what subscription-based crowdfunding is. So you have a lot of similarities. So for example, with perks and rewards, which is part of Kickstarter, that is also part of Patreon. There are perks and rewards that when someone is supporting you at the $25 tier on Patreon or the $15 tier on a recurring monthly basis, they're getting access to exclusive perks and rewards when it comes to that. So there are different ones we can talk about when it comes to that. But basically, this is something where people are supporting you and you're generating recurring income. And by that, it's subscription crowdfunding because you also have different goals that you're trying to reach. So maybe you're trying to get to $1,000 a month. Maybe you're trying to get to a Patreon community of 1,000 people that are in your community. Whatever it is, you have different goals that you're trying to move towards. One of the other interesting things is that when you're launching a Patreon campaign where people can support you on a recurring basis, you can also have a launch schedule. So you could, for example, have a special discount or some kind of a special initiative where you're giving access to all the people who join your community for the first 14 days that you are live, or the first 30 days that you're live, or the first 60 days that you're live. So this is basically a way in which you can use a lot of the things that work with traditional crowdfunding, but rather than doing one big campaign, you're having a bunch of smaller supporters that are supporting you on a recurring income basis, which you can then take that cash and you can plow that into your passion and you can fuel your creative expansion. You can fuel really just whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether that's come out with new artwork or come out with new writing or come out with new podcasts or new videos, or if you're even trying to do something more when it comes to events, whatever it is you're trying to do, you can fuel that using this new community which you're building of subscription patrons, okay? So what are some of the benefits of doing this over Kickstarter? Well, number one is that you're getting income on a recurring basis, which is very nice. You have a tight-knit community of people who are paying you, who are supporting your work. You're also, of course, having a launch period in the same way you would do a Kickstarter, Indiegogo. And also, you can customize your messaging when people start to actually join your community. So there's a lot of benefits. That way you're both building community, both is based in crowdfunding and a lot of the crowdfunding principles. I'd say when it comes to a benefit of Patreon over Kickstarter is that you don't have to worry about continually running and launching up a campaign. Once it's going, and you're just continuing to talk about your community on your videos, on your books, or your podcast, or your blog post, or whatever content on your social media. You're just sharing that link as much as you can to remind people of the benefits of joining your community. With a Kickstarter, you're compressing all that into one time period where you are going live. So the biggest benefit, again, is that you don't necessarily need to do multiple launches in the way you would with a Kickstarter, where you have people have come on the show and they've done 10 campaigns, they've done 20 campaigns on Kickstarter, and they're having to gear up to the launch every single time. With Patreon, you launch once, and then you have a promotional strategy to keep people coming in to that actual community. Now, one of the other drawbacks of doing Patreon is the fact that when you're doing a Patreon or a subscription-based crowdfunding campaign, people are typically supporting at lower amounts. And again, that's because they're supporting on a recurring basis. So you tend to see people more in the $5 to $25 a month category. For someone who's supporting your campaign, $25 a month is considered a lot. When it comes to one of these subscription-based crowdfunding campaigns, I'd say the average is more $5 to $15 when it comes to an average supporter. However, you can also upsell supporters as well. You can have people supporting $100 a month or more. There are a lot of easy ways in which you can actually build more value into your community so people actually value what you're doing. Now, some people will be in that community for a month or 3 months. Some people will be with you for years. It's really about understanding and designing that experience which you would like your patrons to have. So it's smaller amounts of money. However, it's more consistent. And lastly, the biggest drawback I'd see with Patreon is that with Kickstarter, you can actually get this going very quickly, and you can make sure that you're growing very quickly. And it's almost like an exponential growth curve in a very short period of time. With Patreon, it's more of a slow progress where you're getting more patrons, getting more patrons, getting more patrons. I'd say it's more of a linear growth curve until you really get to the point where maybe your audience blows up, and then you can actually have that Patreon blow up at the exact same time. So it's a smaller climb. It's a slower climb if you want to think of it that way. Kickstarter is very rushing funding, exciting, lots of funding. Patreon is a little bit of a slower climb in that way. And I would say that is one drawback. Now, to kind of balance the scales just a tiny bit, I do think that Patreon is a really good fit for some particular types of creators. And that's why I'm talking about it on today's podcast. So specifically, for those of you out there that are podcasters, that are YouTubers, that are bloggers, those of you out there that have original creations that you're making on a very frequent basis, if you're designing comics, for example, artwork, there's a lot of examples of people who are absolutely crushing it on Patreon. If you also are doing in a category that's maybe like a not safe for work or something like that, people are crushing it absolutely on Patreon. So this is where if you have a community, you're trying to actually have the objective of building a community around a brand or around you as a personality, this can be an incredible fit for you because you're monetizing that exact same community. And as you're growing your own influencer base, as you're growing as a brand, as you're growing as an influencer, you can also be monetizing that community on a recurring basis at the exact same time. Now, this is something that's been happening in droves, more and more people using this form of crowdfunding, using subscription-based crowdfunding. I actually wrote about this a while ago, and I was actually one of the first people to kind of hop on this trend and talk about this. And I put out YouTube videos that have had hundreds of thousands of views on this subject. However, this is something where I now have developed a systematic step-by-step system to help you do this. So I usually don't put out something unless I view that I can help in some way. And I think a great example of this is actually a recent interview that we did with Black Sands, which is a great podcast. You can go and check some of the archives of this show. He basically did a WeFunder campaign, which raised $1 million. He did a Kickstarter campaign, multiple campaigns, 6-figure campaigns. And he's also built up a Patreon community of more than 17,000 in terms of recurring revenue that's supporting him on a monthly basis. So this person, this brand is generating over $17,000 per month, more than 1,300 patrons, and it's on a recurring basis. And he's even using this community to do other things like post job opportunities to say, hey, I need a voice actor for this new thing I'm doing. Hey, we need some great artwork for this new thing I'm doing. You know what? I'm also going to give access to some courses courses and training and that kind of stuff. So you can even do other things like that to engage your community and keep people in that community for the long run. So there's a lot that goes into doing one of these campaigns and also making this work for you. So I kind of do in my whole demystify fashion. I went out there, I interviewed a ton of people when it comes to what works in terms of Patreon. I also distilled a lot of the marketing principles that are designed to actually get you funding, get you patrons, design this into a launch to make this work for you so that you're consistently growing your community. So if you're an influencer, if you're trying to become a brand, if you're trying to build a community of people that are supporting you on a recurring basis, if you're in any of the kinds of ways, you're checking those boxes, this is definitely something that should be on your radar. So I put together a new guide called Tricks for Launching a Successful Patreon Campaign. I'm going to link you up here in just a second. But to me, the reason why this is so freaking important is that if there's something out there that you're not utilizing, it's almost like there's a golden treasure that you're just, for whatever reason, haven't taken the steps to move towards. Maybe you don't have a map to be able to find that treasure. It's out there. It's for the picking, right? Anyone can have this. People are already using this. Why not you? And when I was first asking that question, I was actually asking this a lot of times with my coaching students, and they were like, Sal, that sounds awesome. However, I don't think I can pair it with what I'm already doing, which is I'm doing a Kickstarter, I'm doing an Indiegogo, I'm doing this other campaign, I'm doing a WeFunder campaign, I'm doing a Start Engine, whatever it is. But that's when I had that epiphany moment where it's like, what I realized is that there are solutions to these problems in many different ways. So you can have on your calendar, hey, I'm going to do a Kickstarter campaign this year. You know what? And behind the scenes, I'm also going to be working on a Patreon. I'm going to build a community that way. And you know what? I'm also going to be raising money from my company if I want to, based off of all the success that I'm seeing. You can have these different pillars of crowdfunding working in your favor to really assemble a very rock solid structure for your creative company, for your innovative company, for your technology company, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You can use these different solutions within crowdfunding in order to coalesce your crowd, to get funding for your passion, right? To really rally people around something and get them excited, get them raving fans. You can use these different tools that are in your toolbox now to be able to do that. So I think that for that reason, this is why I was starting to focus so much on this guide and why I'm really excited to just get this out there to help more and more people. So if you want to learn more about this, you can go to the link I'm about to mention to discover more about tricks for launching your successful Patreon campaign. Just go to this link I'm about to mention and you can check this out at crowdcrux.com/Patreon tricks. That link is crowdcrux.com/Patreon tricks, crowdcrux.com/Patreon tricks. So you can learn more about that there. I'm going to have a bunch of more content as well coming out about Patreon and subscription-based crowdfunding in the future. I want to put together some free stuff as well to help people. This is a paid guide. However, it's also a very slim volume, very actionable, cuts straight to what you need to do when it comes to the strategic tactics, the things you need to do in order to turn your passion into profit, some of the helpful resources that are out there, as well as how to even get people to discover you in the first place, how to promote your page, avoid common pitfalls, all of that and more I talk about in this guide, which is really based for all skill levels that are out there. So some people that have checked this out are like, this is so cool. It feels like an intensive seminar. This was Patrick Jenkins who said, quite thorough. Thanks. I'm definitely ready. You'll be my go-to guide. Have other people say very nice things about my teachings when it comes to Patreon. Willow Davidson said, thank you for this. I'm a visual artist and this is launching a podcast in spring and my Patreon has been on my radar for a month. I made an account and look forward to keep learning. So this is really meant to be for those of you out there that are just getting started or trying to upgrade your experience when it comes to using subscription-based crowdfunding in your work. And I've tried to design this to be useful, helpful, actionable, none of that theory BS kind of stuff, but really just cuts to the straight edge when it comes to the actual strategic teaching. So I hope you enjoy it. Again, that link is crowdcrux.com/Patreon tricks. Thank you so much. And we will be returning to the interview format as we go next week. Thank you so much. And I will see you next time.